Hello everyone, welcome to another class of biology, and in this class we are going to discuss about cell membrane. This special discussion for today is specially designed for class 9, okay, and this particular subunit comes under the fundamental units of life, okay, and cell membrane, as you all know, is an important constituent of every living cells, okay. So, for example, as we know that the outer covering of most cells, okay, is covered by outer covering, for example, if this is a cell, so inside the cell the content which is present inside the cell is called as the cytoplasm. And this is the fluid like matrix which is present inside the cell. In addition to that, we will have a nucleus which is present also in the cell, okay. The contents of the cell are separated from the external environment, okay. So, whatever the contents that you can see here, they are separated from the external environment. So, this part is the external environment, okay, and by a membrane, and that particular membrane is called as cell membrane. Certain cells, in addition to this cell membrane, they possess an outer layer, okay, and that is called as a cell wall. So, cell wall is a typical feature of plant cells as well as bacterial cells. So, this is an additional layer which is present outside the cell membrane, and this one is cell wall. The cell wall is extremely rigid in structure, and that is freely permeable to most of the molecules in and out of the cell. Why do the cell needs to have a membrane? It needs to protect its constituents from the outside environment, and in addition to that, it should only allow certain molecules to come inside the cell and certain molecule to exit outside the cell. That means कुछ बाहर आएंगे और कुछ अंदर जाएंगे, okay. It should not allow every molecule to come and go in and out of the cell, okay. It should selectively allow certain molecules to go and certain molecules to come in the cell. Whereas the cell wall which is present, which is rigid in structure and it is non-living, cell wall is non-living, please remember this part, okay. So, this is the non-living part, whereas the cell membrane is the living constituent, okay. And the cell membrane, unlike the cell wall which is freely permeable to substances, freely means it does not select which molecules to come in, which molecules to go out, it freely allows all the molecules to come inside and go outside, whereas the cell membrane is selectively permeable. So, when I say selectively permeable, that it only allows certain selected molecules to go inside the cell and to come out of the cell. So, that helps to optimize the functionality of a given cell, okay, and that is what is the major function of the cell membrane. What are the functions of the cell membrane? So, it provides the shape to the cell, it helps to protect the cell, and it also allows selected molecules to go in and out of the cell. So, these are the fundamental aspects or functionalities of the cell membrane, okay. Let us look at what is the cell membrane is made up of, okay. What are the constituents of the cell membrane? If we look at chemically, the cell membrane is made up of 3 or 4 different kind of molecules. One group of molecules is called as the proteins, okay. The other one is a lipid, okay. So, lipid is a class of biomolecules okay, because we know that all our cells are made up of different biomolecules. Okay. These biomolecules include proteins, lipids and carbohydrate as well as nucleic acid. So, these are the different class of biomolecules that our cell constitute of. Out of these, the cell membrane is especially made up of proteins and lipids and some amount of carbohydrate, very little amount of carbohydrates. Okay. If we look at the lipids which are present, lipids are a class of molecule which are hydrophobic. Hydrophobic आपको पता होगा, right? Hydrophobic. Okay. Hydro means water, phobic means head. So, these are the molecules which do not like water. So, that is why these are like oils. Okay. So, lipids are like oils. So, oils are also a kind of lipids. So, when we put or add oil on the top of water, what does it happen? So, they two form a separate layers. Okay. Oil floats on the surface of water because they do not like each other, they do not interact with each other. As they do not interact with each other, that kind of interaction is called as hydrophobic interactions. These lipids which are present here are a special group of lipid called as phospholipids. I will discuss about the structure later on. Okay. So, phospholipids are present as well as another class of lipid which is present in the cell membrane is called as cholesterol. So, these are the two different kind of lipids which are present in the cell membrane. In addition to that, we have certain amount of carbohydrates. So, these are majorly the three different chemical classes present in the cell membrane. If we look at a typical example of a cell membrane which is widely studied, the RBC, the erythrocyte. Erythrocyte is nothing but the RBC, red blood cell. So, if we look at the composition of the cell membrane of red blood cell, it constitutes of around 52% of protein and the total lipids approximately is around 40%, and the rest would be the carbohydrate derivatives. So, this is what chemically each cell membrane is made up of. This composition will vary from cell to cell. It is not exactly the same. This is the composition for a given type of cell, which is the red blood cell or the erythrocyte. Okay. Hope this is clear to you. Okay. So, let us now look at how these different molecules, whether it is proteins or the lipids or the carbohydrates, are arranged in a given cell, okay, inside the cell membrane, how they are typically arranged inside the cell. And that is going to be really the interesting part of it. Okay. So, this is the structure I told you that I will be discussing with you, is the structure of a phospholipid. This is a very typical molecule which has two different groups. One group is called as the head, one part. The other one is called as the tail. Okay. So, the head part of the phospholipid is hydrophilic, that means they like water. So, they will associate with water. Okay. And this association is possible because of the phosphate group. Okay. Phospholipids means this has a phosphate group and this has a fatty acid chain, okay, esterified fatty acid chain, as you can say. So, this is the fatty acid part. This fatty acid part is hydrophobic. Fats do not like water, so they are hydrophobic therefore. So, this part is definitely not going to like water, whereas this part is going to form interactions with water. So, phospholipid is a kind of molecule which is called as amphiphilic. Why it is called as amphi? Amphi means just like amphibians. Okay, they live in both habitats, terrestrial habitat as well as aquatic habitats. Amphi means both. Philic means likingness. Okay, that means they like both lipids as well as water. Okay, because they have a hydrophobic end as well as hydrophilic end. Those which are hydrophobic they can be called as lipophilic because they like oil, right. So hydrophobic means they are lipophilic, right. So as these molecules have the likingness for two different class of molecules, water and lipid oils, so they are called as amphiphilic molecules. Okay. So let us look at the structure of a plasma membrane. Suppose this is a cell, typical cell. If, as we know that inside the cell we have the cytoplasm, right. So this part is the cytoplasm. And primarily the cytoplasm is made up of what? This is made up of water. Okay. And this is the external environment, extracellular space. This is the intracellular space, this is the extracellular space outside the cell, extracellular space. In the extracellular space, the component which is present is also water. So if we look at, okay, so as we know that, so extracellular space is there, intracellular space is there. Plasma membrane is separating the extracellular space from that of the intracellular space, and both are extracellular space as well as intracellular space are both have water. So if we zoom a part of this structure, okay, so let us zoom down the part of the structure and see how does the cell membrane is arranged in this particular part. Okay. We know that the cell membrane is primarily made of phospholipids, and if this phospholipid is going to be arranged like this, so this is the extracellular space, and extracellular space is going to be what? It is going to be water. So this part is going to be water. Okay. And this part is also going to be water. So is this interaction, this part is our water and this part is water. Is this interaction going to be a stronger interaction? No, this interaction is not feasible. It is not feasible. For example, as I have already told you that the head part is hydrophilic. As it is hydrophilic, it will associate with this part, no problem. So association with this part becomes easier. So this is the extracellular part and this is the intracellular part. But here in this kind of arrangement, the intracellular interaction is not going to be there, because this part is water and this part is oil. So they will kind of repel each other. So this structure will not be a stable structure. Okay. So that is the reason. So the arrangement which exists here is something like this. Like this. So now as you can see here, this is the one phospholipid molecule. These phospholipids are arranged in two layers, right, and this interaction is going to be a stable interaction. Why this is stable? Because in this part we have water present and this is the hydrophilic head, so interaction is going to be there. And this part is the extracellular part and what this is hydrophilic, so the interaction is going to be stable. So this kind of structure or arrangement of phospholipid will bring stability to the structure. So this is going to be a stable structure. Clear? So therefore the phospholipids in the plasma membrane are arranged in a bilayer format. Hope this is clear to you. Why this is bilayer? To bring stability in the structure as both intracellular environment as well as the extracellular environment is made up of water. And as the head group is hydrophilic in the phospholipid, so that brings the stable association between the cytoplasmic content and the head group of phospholipid, extracellular content as well as the head group of the phospholipid. So that is why phospholipids are arranged in a bilayer format. This is very, very critical. Hope this is clearer to you. Okay. So now let us move on. Let us see how the so this is what I was telling to you. Okay. So if you look at here, okay, if you look at here, so this is the extracellular space and this is the extracellular space and this is the intracellular space. Okay. And the molecules are arranged, the phospholipids are arranged in a bilayer format. Okay. Okay. So this is the typical structure of a plasma membrane. Okay. And this is a electron micrographic structure of the plasma membrane, as we can see in the electron microscope, which is a high resolution microscope. And this first credible model was proposed by Singer and Nicholson in 1972. Okay. And this model is also called as the fluid mosaic model. I will tell you why it is called as the fluid mosaic model. Okay. If you look at here, what you can see here, the phospholipid bilayers are arranged over here. Okay. So this is where the phospholipid bilayers are arranged. Okay. Okay. And in between that, you can see there are some proteins which are dispersed in the membrane. The proteins can be present inside the membrane, right? Okay, as you can see here, these are the protein membranes which are present inside, and the proteins can also be present on the periphery, on the outside of the membrane. Okay, like this. So the proteins which are associated to the outer layers of the membrane, both inner part of the membrane as well as the outer part, okay, either here or here, this kind of proteins will be called as peripheral proteins. Okay, peripheral proteins. The peripheral proteins are also called as extrinsic proteins. Why they are called as extrinsic? Because they are present outside. And the proteins which are integrated inside, okay, which are present inside, those are called as integral proteins. Integral proteins. Okay. So how can we classify that some proteins are extrinsic, some proteins are integral? Basis the ease of extraction. एक्सट्रैक्शन मतलब सपोज अगर प्लाज्मा मेम्ब्रेन से हमको प्रोटीन को एक्सट्रैक्ट करना है, आइसोलेट करना है, कौन से जल्दी आ जाएगा और इजीली आ सकता है? द पेरिफेरल प्रोटीन्स विल कम इजीली because they are associated, they are interacting with the inside component only, inside part only. So they can be easily extracted. Whereas it would be difficult to extract the integral proteins or the intrinsic proteins. Integral proteins are also called as intrinsic. Intrinsic inside. Peripheral proteins are called as extrinsic, and this is called as intrinsic. So it is difficult to remove integral proteins as compared to the peripheral proteins. And this is how the proteins are interacted with the phospholipid bilayer. The phospholipid bilayer is kind of semi-fluid in structure. It's fluid-like structure, the phospholipid bilayer, and in which the proteins are dispersed just like a iceberg, okay, floating in a lipid bilayer. In a sea of lipid, the proteins are dispersed like an icebergs, and that is why the structure is called as fluid mosaic model. Fluid mosaic model means the phospholipids are arranged, have a fluidity in their structure, and onto that fluid like structure the proteins are dispersed just like an icebergs or mosaic. Okay, so that is why it is called as fluid mosaic model. Okay, and as you can see here on the top of the membrane, okay, here on this part there are some sugar molecules. Carbohydrates are nothing but sugars. So they are associated either with the phospholipid or to the proteins, and these are called either the glycoproteins or the glycolipids. Glycolipid कब बोलेंगे? When the sugar is attached to the lipid component, then it will be called as glycolipid. Glyco means sugar. When the sugar is attached to the lipid, it will be called as glycolipid. When the same sugar is attached to the protein, it will be called as glycoprotein. So mostly suppose ये सेल होता है, सेल के बाहर जो रिसेप्टर्स होते हैं, these receptors are made up of either glycoproteins or glycolipids. So they mostly facilitate some substances to come through this particular inside the cell by interacting with these receptors. Okay, like all the antigens, okay, foreign antigens, when they enter into the cell, they come through the receptors. So receptors are the entry points, the gateways through which they can come. The interactions will start there. Okay, receptor means the part of the cell which is acting as a recipient. Okay, that is why it is called as receptor. Okay, so this is how the different components of the plasma membrane are arranged. Okay, and this model is called as the fluid mosaic model. Okay, this is a typical model that helps to structurally stable the plasma membrane as well as the fluidity of the membrane. ये जो membrane का जो fluidity है, for that the plasma membrane can change its shape. The plasma membrane is flexible, unlike the cell wall. The cell wall is rigid, whereas the plasma membrane is flexible. The flexibility of the plasma membrane is brought about by the fluidity of the phospholipid bilayer. Okay. In addition to that, I said that there are certain other lipids which are present, which are called as the cholesterol. The cholesterols are present in between the phospholipid groups, and that increases the rigidity to some extent. Okay, so that manages the fluidity of the membrane. So phospholipids along with the cholesterol manages the fluidity of the membrane. The proteins which are present in the membrane helps to move substances through them in and out of the cell. Proteins can be called as two types: integral proteins and peripheral proteins. There are also glycolipids and glycoproteins which mostly act as the receptors on the cell surface. So this is typically the structure of a plasma membrane, and this model was first proposed by Singer and Nicholson, which is widely accepted till today. Okay, I hope this particular explanation gives you a clarity on the composition as well as on the structure of the plasma membrane. In the next class, we will continue with the functionalities of the plasma membrane. Okay, thank you very much.